Welcome in, Tony, Christine Robbins, She Warrior, and Mustang. Everybody else, welcome in. Good to see you. Got a disturbing story for you. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome in, everybody. Welcome back to the Sleuth Intuition channel. I'm your host, Patrick Vallejos, broadcasting live from Phoenix, Arizona. Now, this case took place in the early 90s, and I remember hearing about it as a kid on the news. The murders known as Phoenix Canal killings occurred along the Arizona Canal in North Phoenix and shocked the city due to their brutality. The victims were Angela Brosso and Melanie Bernas. Angela on the left, Melanie there on the right. Welcome in, Louise. November 8th, 1992, the eve of her 22nd birthday, Angela, a 1989 graduate of Cedar Cliff High School from Lower Allen Township, Pennsylvania, who had recently moved to Phoenix, went for an evening bike ride near her apartment. She was attacked, stabbed multiple times, and nearly cut in half at the waist due to the frenzied nature of the assault. Her body was found the next morning near 25th Avenue and Cactus Road, naked and mutilated. 11 days later, her head was discovered in the Arizona Canal about 1.5 miles away, showing minimal decomposition, suggesting the killer preserved it, possibly in a refrigerator. Evidence indicated sexual assault, and her purple Diamondback mountain bike was missing. So he would take their bikes as a trophy. And why did these guys feel the need to keep the head? Thanks for stopping by, Mustang. The gruesome nature of Angela Brosso's death, especially the decapitation, caused widespread fear in Phoenix. Melanie Bernas, she died in 1993, September 21st. Melanie, a 17-year-old junior at Arcadia High School, went for an evening bike ride along the canal. Her body was found the next morning floating in the canal about 1.5 miles from Brosso's crime scene. She had been stabbed multiple times, sexually assaulted, and had a cross carved into her chest. Her green SBC Hard Rock Sport mountain bike was missing, just like in Angela's case. So that's what the killer was doing. He was taking their bikes as trophies. Realizing he couldn't keep their heads, right? He had a roommate at the time. A witness reported seeing a puddle of blood and drag marks near the canal. The similarities to Brosso's murder led police to believe the same killer was responsible, heightening public anxiety. Both victims were sexually assaulted, and DNA semen from the same unknown male was recovered from both scenes. The brutality suggested a killer with possible military or specialized training. Police theorized the perpetrator collected trophies, bikes, and in one case, Brosso's head. Neither bicycle was ever conclusively recovered, though police found an old bike in Miller's shed in 2015. Its ownership is still unclear. Welcome in, Christine. Born in 1972, Bryan Patrick Miller grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. He claimed to have endured severe physical and emotional abuse from his mother, Ellen, who died in 2010. Miller alleged that she beat him with belts, the buckle side out, leaving visible welts, and that this abuse shaped his psychological issues. His defense later used this to argue mental health problems, including dissociative amnesia. The hell is that? It's a psychological condition where a person cannot recall important personal information, often related to traumatic or stressful events, beyond what can be explained by normal forgetting. It's part of dissociative disorders, where there's a disruption in memory, identity, and consciousness. In Bryan Patrick Miller's case, his defense claimed he experienced dissociative amnesia during the murders of Angela Brosso and Melanie Bernas, suggesting he was unaware of his actions due to dissociative state triggered by childhood trauma, including abuse from his mother. The court rejected this, finding no evidence to support an insanity defense or lack of responsibility. Yep, exactly. Remember, this is the guy I've been telling you guys about. Beyond creepy. And it's crazy that after you look at the crime scenes and you look at the evidence, it's obvious in hindsight. But when the killer is and the murders are unsolved, you're still trying to piece it together, creating a profile of what kind of a monster is capable of this. By the early 2010s, Miller was a known figure in Phoenix's steampunk and sci-fi convention scene. He created the zombie hunter character inspired by the Resident Evil franchise, which involved a survivalist theme. He wore a menacing mask, goggles, and a long trench coat, and carried a fake Gatling gun. Miller drove a modified former police car, a Ford Crown Victoria, splattered with fake blood labeled Zombie Hunter. This car was a local attraction, often parked at comic conventions, zombie walks, and other events, where he posed for photos, including even with police officers. His persona was well known, and he marketed the car for appearances on social media. What's up, Jerry? To those who knew him casually, Miller appeared shy, awkward, and unassuming, often described as a harmless marshmallow outside of his costume. However, some in the convention community found him creepy and antisocial. His public persona contrasted sharply with his violent past, which was not widely known until his arrest. Miller had a juvenile record of violence. In May 1989, at age 16, he stabbed a woman named Celeste Bentley in the back as she got off the bus in Phoenix, claiming she reminded him of his mother. So let's take a look at that. I should have some videos from that case. So this was admissible in court because it kind of went to his motive and his character. So I'm sharing my screen now. Just bear with me. So when he was a teenager, he attacked this woman, Celeste Bentley. And this is her testimony during the trial.
I've just been stabbed. That guy just stabbed me.
While the court didn't allow Celeste Bentley's face to be shown, her words were no less powerful. She was walking to work near the Paradise Valley Mall in 1989. She had just gotten off the bus. That's when she became Bryan Patrick Miller's first known victim.
I was walking alone, and then I turned and noticed there was someone walking behind me.
Did you know that person?
No. All of a sudden, someone hit me in the back. When I reached back, I grabbed my back, and then I pulled my hand close in front of me because it was wet, and I looked and I saw the blood, and I had known that
that's terrifying.
I just started screaming and running towards my work.
Miller was a teenager at the time. He was found guilty of the attack and served time in juvenile.
Oh, wait, I might have another one. Let's pause that. More from Celeste.
They both would have been unconscious in about 30 seconds or less. And I think they both would have been dead somewhere in the range of 1 to 2 minutes after being stabbed.
The defense is arguing Miller is not guilty by reason of insanity, that he didn't know what he was doing was wrong at the time. But the prosecution is establishing his history of violence that's left trauma with at least one victim who was seriously hurt and hospitalized, but lucky to survive the attack at the hands of Miller.
Did you learn what the person's name was that stabbed you?
Yes.
What was the name?
Bryan Patrick Miller.
Now, for the first time,
they both would have been unconscious in about 30 seconds or.
So that's pretty scary. Bryan Patrick Miller, known as the Zombie Hunter, was convicted and sentenced to death for the murders of Angela Brosso and Melanie Bernas in Phoenix during the early 1990s. His relationship with his mother Ellen was marked by significant abuse and dysfunction, which played a role in his legal defense. Ellen Miller was described as physically and verbally abusive towards Bryan. During his childhood, neighbors and acquaintances such as Pinky, Katayama, and Suzette Hughes noted that Ellen treated Bryan as an unwanted guest in his own home, expressing resentment that her son lived while her husband died. This abusive environment was cited by Miller's defense attorneys, who argued that it contributed to his mental health issues, including a claim of dissociative amnesia during the murders, though the judge rejected the insanity defense. Okay, so I want to play another clip. These are actually people that knew him. Let's hear what they had to say. People that knew him and knew his mother.
But the evidence said otherwise. This was the scene in November 1992. Angela Brosso's decapitated and nude body was discovered by a passing bicyclist along the Arizona Canal. Her head was found 11 days later in the water. The postmortem report showed she'd been sexually assaulted. And this was the scene in September 1993. Melanie Bernas' body was found in the canal less than 2 miles away from where Angela was killed. Melanie's body was mutilated and carved. She was sexually assaulted as she was dying. DNA collected from both women linked them to the same killer. After more than 2 decades, police finally identified a match to their DNA evidence.
Gotcha, bitch.
I don't know what happened. You have to know what happened. No. Your semen is there, but it's the only person that does know is you.
We're gonna watch that interview, part of it.
Your semen could have been with these women.
When Miller finally faced a judge 7 years after his arrest, his defense was not guilty by reason of insanity.
Mr. Miller doesn't know what happened those 2 evenings in 1990. He suffers from complex dissociative disorders, and those are trauma-based disorders.
Miller suffered physical, emotional, and psychological abuse as a child. His mother, Ellen, was a detention officer with MCSO. His father died when he was very young. PTSD and sexual sadism are 2 disorders that Miller has been diagnosed with.
Jesus.
Bryan was like an unwanted guest in his own home. Ellen told me she was pissed off that her son lived and her husband died.
I mean, a psycho mother.
The young man that didn't have a chance to develop his social skills or any skills, basically.
As a teenager, Miller composed this, referred to as the plan. It details the gruesome actions he would eventually carry out as an adult, including kidnapping, stabbing, carving, and
We'll talk
sexual
about
acts.
that.
There's no question that what the defendant did deserves the death penalty.
Right? Deserves the death penalty. Will he ever get that? Probably not. All right, let's continue on here. A pivotal moment in their relationship occurred when Bryan was a teenager. While he was in juvenile detention for stabbing a woman in 1989, Ellen found a disturbing note in his room detailing a plan to abduct, rape, murder, and dismember a young woman. Alarmed, she turned the note over to Phoenix police and refused to let Bryan return home after his release. Expressing fear for her own safety, this led to Bryan moving into a halfway house operated by the Mennonite Outreach Program. All right, let's take a look at what this plan was here. The plan was a document written by Miller as a teenager around the time of his 1989 arrest, stabbing Celeste Bentley in Phoenix. It detailed a scheme to kidnap, rape, torture, and murder a young girl, including methods to restrain the victim, evade detection, and dispose of the body. So this is what I'm talking about when I try to explain to you guys that these types of killers, they've always been on their way to prison. It just had to be at the behest of Angela Brosso and Melanie Bernas and a couple of other suspected cases, unsolved cases that they tied to him. The document was described as methodical and premeditated, reflecting sadistic intent and a fascination with control and violence. It included specific steps such as targeting a vulnerable victim and using a secluded location. I'm telling you, this guy's nuts. In adulthood, Bryan discussed his mother's abuse with her. He later wrote from prison that she acknowledged her horrible actions and apologized, though he described her as not a very good person in so many ways. Ellen died in 2010 before Bryan's arrest for the Canal Murders in 2015. The defense's focus on Ellen's abuse aimed to mitigate Bryan's sentence, but the court ultimately found him fully responsible for his actions, emphasizing the brutality of the crimes. No evidence suggests Ellen was involved in or aware of Bryan's criminal activities beyond the note that she reported. All right, let's check in on the chat here. Growing Crazy, good to see you. What's up, Mark? So the murders went unsolved for over 2 decades, earning the moniker Canal Killings. Despite DNA evidence, the killer's profile was not in CODIS and leads dried up. Suspects like European surgeon and a special forces operative were investigated but cleared. The Vidocq Society, a group of forensic experts, profiled the killer as likely local, with the precursor crimes and possible prior police contact. So that was perfect. You know, he was local. He was killing in his backyard. You know, why Delphi? Why this victim? What, you know, because they lead back to the killer. Everything that happens at that crime scene is a clue to who committed the crime. The question is trying to fill in the gaps. It's kind of like arrows that you can't really see. You have to kind of piece them together. In the early 2010s, Phoenix Police Department cold case unit led by Detective Sergeant Troy Hillman and Detective Clark Schwarzkopf revisited the case. Hillman described the case files as massive and spent years combing through them. In 2014, Phoenix Police collaborated with Identifiers International led by Colleen Fitzpatrick, using genetic genealogy and analyzed crime scene DNA against public genealogy databases, identifying the surname Miller. This narrowed the suspect pool to 6 individuals with the last name Miller. Bryan Patrick Miller, already flagged due to his 1990 stabbing case, emerged as a prime suspect. So they were looking, based on the FBI profile, they had Miller in a pool of potentials because of his prior crime and living near the crime scene. And that was all based off of an FBI profile. That's brilliant. To confirm Miller's involvement, Schwarzkopf surveilled him at his Amazon warehouse job, noting his zombie hunter car. In January 2015, under the ruse of a job interview, Schwarzkopf met Miller at a restaurant, collected his water glass, and sent it for a DNA analysis. So the same way that they caught Rex Heuermann is how they caught Miller. Brilliant. Was the note? I couldn't find it. Louise, if you guys know where to find it, send it to me if you could. What's up, Scorpio? All right, let's talk a little bit about the trial. So it started October 2022, bench trial, no jury. with Judge Suzanne Cohen presiding per Miller's choice. 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, 1 count of sexual assault, and 1 count of attempted sexual assault for the deaths of Brosso and Bernas. Miller's attorneys admitted he was the killer, but pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, which I think it did help him avoid the death penalty. I believe it was a mitigating factor, something similar to what Brian Koberger tried to do with his autism. Citing severe childhood abuse by his mother, they argued he developed dissociative amnesia, preventing him from remembering the murders, and claimed his mental health issues stemmed from trauma. The psychologist testified to his condition, though Miller denied the amnesia claim, insisted he didn't commit the crimes. The defense also highlighted Miller's zombie hunter persona as a creative outlet, not evidence of violent intent. Noting his involvement in the steampunk community as non-lethal costume props. The prosecution relied heavily on DNA evidence linking Miller to both victims. They emphasized the brutality of the crimes, including Brosso's decapitation and Bernas' mutilation, arguing Miller was a calculated serial killer. They dismissed the insanity defense, pointing to his ability to evade capture for over 20 years, while living a seemingly normal life as a single father and Amazon employee. So he had a young daughter and he was just hiding in plain sight, just like Richard Allen. Testimonies from investigators like Hillman and Schwarzkopf detailed the DNA breakthrough and Miller's prior stabbings as evidence of a pattern. On April 11th, 2023, Judge Cohen found Miller guilty on all 6 counts. She rejected the insanity defense, citing the premeditated nature of the crimes. Welcome in, Boston. On June 7th, 2023, Cohen sentenced Miller to death, stating, "The defendant did not just murder them, he brutalized them, and he evaded capture for over 20 years. Arizona law mandates an automatic appeal for death penalty cases. Miller, now in his 50s, resides on death row." Okay, so he's also a suspect in the case of Brandy Myers. So if we have time, we'll dive into that. But right now, we're going to watch his interrogation video. Well, at least part of it. Let's see. Share my screen. All right, let me know if you guys have any problems hearing this.
What part of town did your grandma live in?
She was North Phoenix. Then she moved to Washington State, and but it was
Okay, so some time has passed, right, since the murders. This is actually, I believe, the first cold case solved through genetic genealogy. So it was this one, and then I think the Golden State Killer. So what they did was they ran the DNA, and years after the crimes, they got a hit. They narrowed it down to Miller. They concocted a ruse against him. They told him, "Hey, we want you to come work with us. We want you to do security for us. We'll meet you at a local bar, and we'll interview you. See if it's something you might be interested in." So the investigators acted like they worked for this company and they were doing an interview. And when they were all done, they collected his glass. It became evidence. And then they matched his DNA that way. Very similar to what they did with Rex Heuermann. Remember, they followed him. And when he threw his pizza away, They went and grabbed it out of the trash and ran the DNA off the crust that he had left behind.
35th, right around 35th and Olive.
In Olive.
Is-
So Dunlapish Olive. And so about 10 years old, you come out here, you're living with grandma originally?
Yeah.
And then mom came out?
Yeah.
Is there a reason you came out to live with grandma, or?
I never got a reason why. I think it was mostly financial.
What were your folks doing?
My mom was, at the time that I remember, she was security at a grocery store.
In Hawaii?
Yeah.
What island were you on?
Oahu.
Well, do you guys live in the main, like Waikiki, or?
In Kaneohe.
I can't spell
Yeah. Kaneohe is the area where they filmed a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean.
that. So 10 years old, you're what, fourth grade-ish?
Just going in the fifth.
Yeah. Was your dad around?
No, he passed away in 1977.
Sorry to hear that.
He's the reason why we were in Hawaii, because he was Army.
What did he do in the Army?
Let's see, started at Fort Knox, and then see, I don't know a lot about my dad.
You don't know what he did?
I know he was Special Forces, but that's all I know.
So he passed away in 87, is that what you said?
77.
70.
Yeah.
So you were 5-ish?
Yeah.
You were born in 72, right?
Yeah.
So mom, you guys stay there for at least a few years, 5 years. Mom sends you out here for a year. And then you live with grandma. What was grandma's name?
Leela James.
That was grandpa around, or?
He passed away.
Before you came out here, or?
No, it was after 80s, late 80s, early 90s.
What was his name?
David James.
David Dan. So while you were out here with grandma and grandpa, did you get along with them very well, or?
I got along with him great.
What about grandma?
For the most part, you know, she was probably at the time my best friend. Her and my aunt. See, when I moved there, it was my grandmother and my grandfather, even though they were divorced. He was in no shape to live on his own, so they had him still living under the same roof. And it was my aunt and her husband at the time. And my aunt's name was, at the time, Barb Hamill. It's now Barb James. And her husband was Gordon Hamill.
And how'd you get along with them?
Got along with them great. My uncle was really tough. I got picked on a lot, so he tried teaching me things.
Another incel.
Like martial arts, but
One of the many forms of jujitsu,
Yeah.
karate.
we did that for a little while, and then he kind of dropped it.
Did you like it at all, or?
I mean, what kid doesn't like
Do you remember
learning
any?
stuff like
You remember any cool moves that you learned?
that? No.
No.
It was, he was trying to teach me to defend myself, but it was like, you know, I'd rather just walk away.
Now, what made the kids pick on you in school?
Well, in Hawaii, they picked on me because I was white.
Howley.
Yeah, Howley. And here, it was because I was different. I wasn't like the other kids because, you know, I raised in a different environment. I kept to myself. Didn't like sports. But
So what were you into as a smaller kid?
I liked bicycles for a while. Well, I still do. I collect them more than anything. But
What kind of bikes?
I used to have like old Schwinn's.
I don't know about you. When I first heard him say that, it gave me chills down my spine. He said, I collect bikes. Remember, in both cases, the bikes were missing and taken by the killer. And he just told the investigator, I kind of collect bikes.
Anything, but
What kind of bikes?
I like bicycles for a while. Well, I still do. I collect them more than anything, but
What kind of bikes?
I used to have like old Schwinn's. I had
So basically, the image that they're kind of painting with all the evidence is that he would lay in wait and somewhere along these trails, right? And it almost sounds as if he would ride up, catch up to you, follow you. You wouldn't even know that he's behind you. You know, you had your headphones on or whatever. And he would almost jump from his bike onto yours and stab you in the back with a giant, I think it was like a chef's knife that he stole from his roommate. So, I mean, how are you going to see that coming unless you're fully aware of your surroundings? How are you going to know that you're being stalked by this guy who all of a sudden increases his speed on his bike, crashes into you, knocks you off your bike, or just literally jumps from his bike onto yours without even stopping, and at the same time plunging a knife into your back? I mean, I don't know how. You would have to just be completely aware of your surroundings. Otherwise, you could have, it wouldn't matter if you had a gun or not. How are you going to see that coming? That shit's pretty scary. And he knew that it would be effective. He's fantasized about this since he was 15. He even wrote about it.
I had the West Coast Chopper's bike for a while, and the Orange County Chopper, Huffy, or not Huffy, but Schwinn. Anything that's different stands out. You know, I had the big balloon tire bike for a while.
You thought it was like the beach, quasi beach combers
Yeah.
or something similar to that.
So it's just the ones that stand out.
What about the BMX stuff?
I had a BMX bike when I was a kid. That was my first bike.
So notice how the bike aspect of all this points to our killer, right? Now that, of course, hindsight is 2020, but that's something very important to him. But notice how he incorporated it in his fantasy. All the things that are important to him and all the things that he's bringing up in his interview, very similar to the Delphi murders. Everything that happened with Abby and Libby involved things that were important to Richard Allen. That's why he incorporated them in his crime, in my opinion.
Just beachcombers and just chopper type
I
bikes.
do have a mountain bike that I use in the trails by my house every once in a while. But
What kind of mountain bike?
Mongoose.
Mongoose. So it like got the cool forks on it and stuff.
It's got suspension forks, got hydraulic disc brakes.
How's it going, CJ?
21 speed or
Yeah, something like that.
18, 21.
I haven't ridden it
in a while. How long do you have that bike?
I still have it.
No, I know, but you get it when you're a little bit older or as an adult?
I've had it for 3 years.
3 years. So how long did you ride like the chopper type bikes?
Maybe a year. Because they're awkward.
To the beachcombers?
Yeah, I ended up selling them. I had, this year I sold, well not this year, last year, I sold 2 of my cruisers. I had an 1803 Felt. It's kind of like an old Harley.
Imagine if you're driving a dead person's bike and you don't even know it, and you're just passing it down within the family, taking it to Goodwill, selling it at a yard sale or something.
So what trails around your house were you riding?
Trail 100.
Okay, that's something like North Mountain Park kind of?
Yeah. I take it from 7th Street. You know, they've got the visitor center park area right across from the point. And then I ride it over to where the Sunny Slope School and the police department is, and then ride back.
So did you ride frequently, or were you at the time, or?
I haven't ridden my bike since maybe 6 months ago.
Kind of goes in phases.
Yeah.
What about when you were younger? Is that how you got around, or
Yeah, that's how I got around until I got a car.
when did you get a car?
Shoot. I had a roommate at the time. He would loan me his car for a while, and then I bought, after the church, knew someone that was selling a car, and I bought that. It was
What church?
Perry's Valley, Mennonite.
Mennonite? Now, you still belong to that, or is that back then? Or
My daughter goes to it. You know, I don't go to it anymore because I work Sundays. And
now, were you raised as a Mennonite, or
no, I started going there like early 90s.
to the Mennonite church? Then?
Yeah.
What were you before that? Or
My mom.
were you raised in a certain religion?
I guess if I was raised in any religion, it was Mormon.
Mormon.
But my mom, that was her thing. And when I moved in with my grandmother, I, couldn't stop.
Right.
Yeah.
So the grandma and grandpa weren't churchgoers?
No, they weren't. They were religious, but not church-going.
Just kind of their own beliefs are at the home.
Yeah. I did find out my grandmother, when she was a kid, had been with the Mennonite church for a while, but otherwise, family's been religious, but not, like regular churchgoers. Although my mom, before she passed away just a couple of years ago, cancer, she was going to like a non-denominational church with her husband.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah, so when you were a kid, you're roughly 5th grade, coming out to Phoenix. Where'd you go to school? Do you remember?
I don't remember the name of my elementary schools. There was one near where my grandmother lived.
That's okay. I don't remember.
But then when my mom got her own
There's
place,
the cup, the mug.
Union Hills.
Sneaky bastards.
Did you go to Park Meadows then, or?
Sunrise or Sunset or something like that. And then I went to Desert Sky Junior High and Berry Goldwater High School. Got my GED. First job was Burger King, then Smitty's.
Letter to the judge.
St. Paul. Got married. Went to Washington State.
It's his mom.
Divorced. Went back to work for St. Paul. And then now I work at Amazon. I have a daughter who's at home right now. I have her full custody.
Does she see mom at all, or?
Maybe like once or twice a year.
And something between those two, or just the divorce in general?
It was the divorce. I filed for divorce after my wife was cheating on me, and I requested joint custody, and my ex-wife kept having CPS called on her, and issues came up, and she was trying to get custody of my daughter so they could move, and the judge ruled that I got full custody.
So hopefully that gives you kind of an idea of what we're dealing with here. Let's talk a little bit about an unsolved case that they believe 100% was perpetrated by Miller. There's a couple other unsolved cases very similar to Angela's that are still unsolved. So Angela and Melanie. And he's the prime suspect. But in the case of Brandy Myers, she still hasn't been found. But they know it's him. He even confessed to his wife about it. So let's talk a little bit about that. May 22nd, 1992, Sunny Slope area, Phoenix, Maricopa County, Arizona. Presumed non-family abduction homicide. Her body hasn't been found yet. Current status is unsolved, but considered solved but not solved by Phoenix police, with Bryan Patrick Miller as the primary suspect. Brandy was last seen around 8 p.m. on May 26, 1992, at the corner of 10th Street and Hatcher Street in Phoenix Sunny Slope neighborhood. So that's right up the street, or a few doors down from Bryan Patrick Miller. So kind of like Brian Chadwell. Remember, the young girl just went up the street. The last place she was. Go door to door to try to win these prizes. It was ridiculous. And our parents would just let us go out and do these things at the ages, around age 12, even younger. Elementary school. She was a sixth grader. Her friend briefly went into a Smitty's grocery store, and when they returned, Brandy was gone. She was last seen 2 doors down from the residence of Bryan Patrick Miller, walking in that direction. She was a white female, 4'9", 75 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, wore pink and yellow eyeglasses, had scars on her cheek and upper left knee, pierced ears, and an oval-shaped strawberry birthmark. Location unspecified. She had been diagnosed with brain damage, which made her trusting and naive. So it made her a vulnerable target, and that's what Miller fantasized about. All right, here's the evidence linking Miller to Myers, and he's linked to a number of cases. The proximity. Brandy was last seen near Miller's residence, making him a person of interest. His ex-wife's testimony after Miller's 2015 arrest. His ex-wife, Amy, told police that he confessed to killing a developmentally delayed girl who knocked on his door for a fundraiser, stabbing her, cutting her throat, dismembering her, and disposing of her remains in the garbage. So it's almost as if she'll never be found. This matches Brandy's profile and circumstances. And remember, she was last seen 2 doors down from his home. The plan. The documents themes of abduction, sexual assault, murder, and body disposal align with the suspected fate of Brandy, supporting the theory that Miller acted on his earlier fantasies. He specifically said he was going to target a vulnerable person. In 2015, Phoenix police recommended charging Miller with first-degree murder on Brandy's case, citing his confession and proximity. The Maricopa County Attorney's Office declined to prosecute due to insufficient evidence, as Brandy's body was never found and there was no DNA or physical evidence. Police consider the case solved but not solved, meaning they believe Miller is responsible but lack of evidence for charges. The investigation remains active, right? Sounds like the whole unknown part of the Delphi murders. So that is pretty much all I had for you guys. We'll spend the next 10 minutes, or actually, we'll probably wrap it up here in a minute or two. I just wanted to share this interesting case, this rabbit hole that I went down. It's just crazy that we don't hear more about these types of cases, We hear people just constantly talking about, Ted Bundy, the BTK, but there's hundreds of unknown cases out there that are sometimes even more grim. than those tales. You know, there's hundreds of Bryan Kohbergers out there. Bryan Patrick Millers. This guy seemed normal. I'm going to go for a bike ride. And you have this fucking guy stalking you. You wouldn't see him coming. And if for whatever reason you did see him coming, he will probably just keep going. Like, oh, that's not my opportunity. But if he sees that you don't see him and he just jumps right on you, and you're thinking you're safe because you're going fast on your bike, right? You know, you're going about 10 miles an hour, you're getting a good workout. Well, here comes Bryan Patrick Miller doing 15 miles per hour, and he's slowly catching up to you. And you're not thinking, hey, like there's nobody in front of me. Nobody's going to hurt me. I'm hauling ass down this trail. You know, they good luck catching me. Not even thinking that there's some psychopath with mom issues with a giant chef's knife stalking you. I just don't know how somebody would prepare for that. I feel like we can't even go about our day-to-day business. We can't live our lives because these guys are out there and there's a lot more of them. That's why I covered this story. A lot of you haven't even heard of this case. You know, there's hundreds and hundreds of cases out there, true crime cases of brutal homicides, serial killers, and it's like nothing. You know, they might bring it up on the news. Oh, 2 families found brutally murdered by such and such. I mean, we still have a guy who was on the loose in Washington after killing 3 of his children. He's out there somewhere. God forbid you cross paths with that man. Or a Bryan Patrick Miller. Or a Richard Allen. A Bryan Kohberger. The only question is, how do you see it coming? I'm trying to figure that out, guys. Help me understand that. And the part that drives me crazy is everything that we learn and understand is all hindsight. There's no way to implement a system. Because these guys are so good, guys and gals, they're so good at hiding in plain sight. And not only that, they're extra manipulating. You know, they're very manipulative. So normal people who just go about their business like, hey, I made a friend today. You have no clue that they're targeting you and grooming you, sheepdogging you into the direction that benefits some kind of sick fantasy. They might even be plotting to kill your ass. So stay vigilant. Don't trust anybody. And don't do anything that I wouldn't do.